Okay, well, thank you all for being here and for taking the time. My name is Althea Gonzalez, and I'm the Program Manager in North Carolina for Hispanics in Philanthropy. And we're going to go through a somewhat brief PowerPoint that will give you an opportunity to understand more about what HIP is, what our work in North Carolina is, and then what this grant opportunity is, and the application process. This will also be an opportunity for you to tell us some about your organization and about what are some of the capacity building ideas you may have. This is definitely an interactive session where you'll have the opportunity to kind of hear from one another and hopefully learn from one another and perhaps meet folks that you haven't met before or organizations you haven't worked with before. A few little logistical things. If you have a question that you'd like to ask in the chat window, please feel free to do so anytime during the presentation. You can also just go ahead and speak up if you'd like to ask a question in the middle and interrupt me. We will definitely have time at the end for more question and answers as well. And excuse me one second, somebody else is calling in who's not being able to get on. One moment. Hi, this is Althea. Hey, Paul, did you get in? Okay, I'm so sorry. Just give us a call back and let us know when, okay? Okay, thanks, bye-bye. Okay, all right, so you'll be able to, as I said, submit questions in the chat window. The other piece is that if you happen to lose communication as all of a sudden you can't hear me, if you see up at the top bar where it says File, Edit, Share, View, Communicate, go under Communicate to Teleconference, and there if you lose communication you can rejoin the conference without having to call back in. All right, let's see, any more housekeeping? And definitely you can also select full screen view at any time to see the presentation up close as opposed to in this smaller window, and then go back and forth between those two. Okay, I think that's it for the logistics. We will go ahead and get started. And in order to get started, I would first like to have you all unmute yourselves and introduce yourself with your name and your organization so we can hear all of who is on the call today. So if we can start, Allison.
Hi, my name's Allison Yonis, and I'm here with Latino Community Development Center.
Great, thank you. Angeline?
Hi, my name's Angeline Echeverria, and I'm with El Pueblo. We're based in Raleigh.
Thank you. David?
Hi, my name is David Forcaro, and I'm with Faith Action International House in Greensboro.
Thank you. Jay? Jay, are you there?
Yes, I can't unmute. Okay. This is Jay Adams with Latino Coalition in Randolph County.
Good to talk with you. Okay, Joyce? Is Joyce on, Jay?
Hi, I'm here. I'm Joyce Samara with the Latino Coalition of Randolph County.
Great. Mary Jo?
Hi, this is Mary Jo Turner with Hispanic League in Winston-Salem.
Great. Pam?
Hi, this is Pam Citronell. I'm with El Vínculo Hispano in Siler City.
Thanks. Pauline? Is Pauline on?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Pauline Morris. I'm with the International Center of Foresight Tech in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Great. Whitney?
Hi, this is Whitney Smith. I'm with the Latin American Coalition in Charlotte.
Okay. Thank you. Rachel and Felicia? Are you there? guess I'll introduce them. Rachel is the wonderful program assistant here with me in the North Carolina office, and Felicia is an intern from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation that is helping us out this summer, and a wonderful addition, so they're there as well. And it looks like I might have a couple other callers that I missed that I don't have names for. Anybody that didn't get to introduce themselves? Speak now or hold your peace for a minute or two more. Okay, let us proceed then. Thank you all. It's great to have you with us. So let me first give you a quick overview about HIP and about the Funders Collaborative. As you can see there, HIP has been around for almost 30 years. Next year will be our 30th year. And our mission is really threefold. It is about increasing the participation of Latinos in philanthropy. When HIP started, there were barely any Latinos anywhere in the philanthropic world across the country. So one of our purposes was definitely to have more Latinos in decision-making positions in the world of philanthropy. The second is to increase the philanthropic dollars that are going to Latino communities both here in the U.S. and in Latin America. When HIP started, less than 1% of philanthropic dollars were going to Latino organizations. And sad to say, now almost 30 years later, it has not improved greatly. We still, even though we're 15 or 16% of the U.S. population, receive about 1% of the philanthropic dollars. So it's still our work to increase the presence of Latino organizations in the lens of philanthropy so that more dollars are going to Latino organizations. And then the third part is really about changing how philanthropy does its work, having philanthropy become more equitable and inclusive, not just in their grant making, but in their composition, in boards, in staffing, and really that they're always looking at how do we serve the Latino population and other minority populations as well. So really our mission is that threefold of making Latinos a greater presence in philanthropy and larger recipients of philanthropic dollars. And one of HIP's pieces of accomplishing that is through the Funders Collaborative. Started about 10 or 11 years ago. The objective of the Funders Collaborative was really to focus philanthropic investment in Latino communities. And how we did that in part was by incentivizing local funders to make investments to Latino organizations by giving them an opportunity to qualify for a national match of dollars. So the Triangle Community Foundation, for instance, if they put in $1, then they receive $1 as well from national funders such as Kellogg and the Ford Foundation and others. And that was definitely an incentive for many funders to participate. And our purpose was really to focus on building the organizational capacity of small to medium-sized Latino nonprofits. The Latino nonprofit sector is pretty young, actually, in the United States. And so there are not that very many organizations that are huge organizations like La Raza that have budgets over $2 million. Most of Latino nonprofits are much smaller, and we wanted to make sure to strengthen them and help them continue to grow. We also found through the Funders Collaborative that it was an opportunity to teach those in philanthropy a bit about what was happening in Latino communities, what the particular challenges were to Latino nonprofits, and the important role that Latino nonprofits play in the larger society in helping Latinos, both those born here and those immigrating here, to become part of the fabric of American culture and society. So we've done a lot of cultural competency training with our funders to help them understand these issues. And lastly, we believe that Latino organizations are those who are led by Latinos and serving Latinos. And so our focus is how do we strengthen the leadership of the Latino nonprofit sector to make sure that we have more and more organizations that are well-led, effectively led by Hispanics. So a big part of our presence is really uncovering Latino leadership, supporting Latino leadership to take a larger role in the nonprofit world. So let me tell you a little bit about where HIP has done its work. As you can see by all those dots, HIP has done work not only in the United States, but also in Latin America, and Puerto Rico, and Santo Domingo, and Mexico, and Argentina. Many, many places it has done its work. And you see the little star indicates HIP's headquarters in San Francisco. Of all of HIP's sites throughout the U.S. and Latin America, North Carolina has been HIP's largest and most successful site. We have had more funders participate in North Carolina, more money raised in North Carolina, more Latino nonprofits supported in North Carolina, and more money given away than in any other site. That includes more than our New York site, our California site, our Chicago site, other places that you might have thought would have been a much bigger deal for Latino investment. But North Carolina has been number one for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that North Carolina has a very strong philanthropic sector, and the funders in North Carolina around 2000, 2001, many of them went on a trip to Mexico through the Center for International Understanding and got a firsthand look at what's happening in the transnational landscape, and came back and said, we really need to do something, and invited HIP to come to North Carolina, and they've been very proactive at supporting Latino organizations. So we're really proud here in North Carolina to carry that banner of number one, and to continue that work through this grant cycle and certainly through future opportunities in North Carolina. We have a variety of funders who are currently participating in this round, and I want you to just take a moment to look at this list to recognize that we have funders who are local funders like the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro. We have funders who are more corporate funders like Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We have statewide funders such as the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. And so this multilateral collaborative, so to speak, has been a very powerful force in investing in Latinos. And one more piece about HIP's history in North Carolina. When HIP came to North Carolina, there had never been a funders collaborative in North Carolina. HIP was the first funders collaborative. Now, many years later, there are lots of funders collaboratives supporting a variety of issues from education to health and so forth. And also when HIP came to North Carolina, there was not a single Latino anywhere in philanthropy, not as a board member, not as an executive director, not even as an admin. And so our funders have done an amazing job of really recognizing the gap in membership for Latinos in philanthropy in North Carolina and been working to address that. And so we have made great strides. We're not done yet, but have made great strides. So those are our current funders. So if you happen to see them, please feel free to thank them for being a part of the collaborative. Before we get to the actual grant making, I want to stop and see if there are any questions about what HIP is or its work in North Carolina. Okay, hearing no further questions, let's talk about HIP grant making. So we really have only three criteria in order to be able to be eligible for a HIP grant. The first is to have an annual budget under $2 million, which I assume all of you qualify for here in North Carolina, that you are a nonprofit, a 501c3, or that you have a fiscal sponsor. And that's an unusual thing. Many funders will not fund unless you are a 501c3, but again, with our focus about building capacity of Latino organizations, we recognize that you've got to start somewhere. And so we absolutely have been grant makers for lots of organizations that did not have their 501c3 yet and had a fiscal sponsor, and so we welcome you if you're in that situation. And then that you're Latino-led and Latino-serving. And so the Latino-led part on the left in the leadership chart there is either that the executive director is Latino, a majority of the management team is Latino, or a majority of the board is Latino. And then the Latino serving part is that your mission specifically states that it targets Latinos or a subgroup of Latinos, and or that a majority of the people who are served by your organization are Latino. And let me say, in other parts of the United States, that first piece about targeting a subgroup of Latinos actually is effective and used. There's a Venezuelan organization and a Puerto Rican organization in our New York and Philadelphia sites. But in North Carolina, we're still bonded together as one group of Latinos typically. We don't have enough in order to be separate for the most part. So just make sure that you can check one off of each of those sides of the chart, that you are either that you are led by Latino and serving Latino both. All right, capacity building grants. So there are a variety of different kinds of grants, general operating grants, which unfortunately are few and far between and really are often the most helpful for nonprofits, but hard to get funders to do general operating support. There are programmatic grants, such as when you have, let's say, an ESL program or a diabetes program, and you want to staff that or expand that program, that you can apply for programming support. And then there's capacity building grants, and capacity building is exclusively what our Funders Collaborative has done these last 10, 11 years. And it is specifically around activities that help you strengthen the systems and the infrastructure of your organization. So my typical analogy is if you have a house, the programming is the furniture. You can bring programming in and out and change programming, but the structure itself, the floor, the walls, the ceiling, that is the capacity building that needs to be strong. And typically what makes an organization weaker is not the level of its programming, but it's the level of its infrastructure and systems. Nonprofits, when they shut down, typically is not because one program went bad, but because there was mismanagement of finances or leaders who were not well trained or ineffective human resource processes. So that's the area that we really focus on, is building the capacity of your organization to effectively carry out your programs by having a solid organization. So here are some examples of capacity building projects. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but you can see in there strategic planning, working on fundraising, evaluation. Let me say a few things about those first three. We have a lot of organizations who begin, especially young organizations, who begin with an idea, oh, we want to help our community with after-school programming. And they just start doing programming without having planned and thought, how are we going to go about doing that? How are we fundraising? How are we staffing it? What's our plan for our organization? So strategic planning is often one of the linchpins to having an organization be successful and be able to stick to their mission. Fundraising, you all know about the need for fundraising, and part of our work, like most funders, is to help you figure out how do you have a diversity of funding so that you're not dependent on one grant or only grants, and how do you build other avenues of income. Evaluation oftentimes is a real key to building other avenues of income, because if you can have a moment to assess the effectiveness of your programming and the effectiveness of your organization and tell the story, all of a sudden you are more effective at raising money both from funders as well as individual donors or members. You have a story to tell, and a compelling story is often what loosens the pocketbook. So evaluation is definitely a piece of capacity building. Then you'll see technology, which we've done a variety of technology upgrades. If you're interested in something along those lines, we can have a conversation about that as well. Staff and board development, really critical, since the staff needs to be able to function well, but in particular the areas that we've noticed weakness is in board members who may not know how to carry out their duties as board members. They may not understand their fiscal and legal responsibilities and their oversight responsibilities for the organization. And we've had a couple organizations who had a very talented ED, maybe a founding ED, who then left the organization. And then the board was kind of, they had been dependent upon that ED for so long, they really weren't being active. And then all of a sudden that ED leaves and the board finds themselves floundering and having to learn on the fly how to be a board. So we find that board development is a big piece that's often needed in capacity building. And then you'll see a variety of different things below there, coalition building, communications, human resource management, and several others. So I want to stop a minute and see if there are questions about this brief listing of capacity building projects.
Hi, Althea. It's Pam.
Hey, Pam.
Will the slides be available?
Yes, I'll send you all a recording of this whole session, and I'll certainly send you also the PowerPoint separately.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions about capacity building?
This is David.
Okay. Go ahead, David.
Sure. Yeah. How would you suggest interested organizations really prioritize when probably most organizations could really benefit from help in each one of those sectors? How would you suggest prioritizing?
A very good question. And in a second, I'm going to give you all, we'll talk about that organizational assessment that I sent out in the email. And that sometimes can be a really good way for you all to assess where are the biggest areas of weakness, so to speak, and have that be an analysis that's done with your staff and board so that you all can prioritize. But we can also, speak offline about it if you have questions and you're thinking, well, we have these 5 things which would be the most effective. But we'll talk about that a little further when we get to the assessment.
Great.
Thank you for your question. Somebody else had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, this is Pauline.
Hi, Pauline.
The human resources management, what does that mean exactly?
We sometimes have EDs who are very talented in the programming side, but they've never really had to lead an organization. They don't know how to put in processes for working with staff. How do you do staff reviews? What happens if you have problems with the staff and so forth? So it's both the policies and procedures and processes around managing the staffing side of the organization.
I see. Thank you.
And it can be, everything from having a consultant come in and help you, look at, do you have a thorough employee manual that covers everything, to an ED who may need to find a coach to work on their leadership and management skills.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Any other questions? Okay. So this slide is very interesting because we started using this slide about 3 years ago when the economy tanked, and it still has not recovered in the same way that we would like to see it, and so a lot of these things are still very important and to think about in capacity building at this time. So one of them, capacity building can be an exploration of some alliances that you might create with other organizations. Perhaps you are having a challenge with your facilities. You realize it's costing you too much rent. Is there a way to merge space with another organization, or do cost sharing of bookkeeping, or even perhaps merge your whole organization with another one, and you want to explore that. Capacity building funding can be used for that kind of exploration. Sustainability planning, having someone come in and look at where are your costs versus your income, and what would be the best ways to reduce some of those costs. And then how to be adaptable and flexible in your strategic plan. Some consultants now are moving away from the concept of strategic planning to strategic priorities, acknowledging that with this shifting economic dynamic that we have, that sometimes doing a 3 or 5 year strategic plan is actually not useful, because 6 months later the economy has changed and you have to do a whole new strategic plan. So some consultants are talking about strategic priorities, like where should the arrows be pointing in your organization, and make sure they're still pointing in that direction, rather than a clear goal that you have to meet within 3 years and then everything changed in between. And that is particularly important, I think, for our Latino organizations, because several of you are working in very dynamic environments where the next ICE raid can totally shift the focus of your organization for the next 6 months as you take care of a community that's reeling from those kinds of things. So it sometimes can be very helpful to think about how do we plan and be flexible and nimble in this changing environment. So those are some things to think about in this time frame. Not that these are prioritized kind of projects by any means, but these may be projects that your organization may want to explore. So in addition to doing grant making, HIP also provides training and convenings. We work on doing convenings at least once a year and sometimes twice a year. Last year we had 2. This year we'll have 1 in the fall. And for those of you who have not been to a convening, it has multiple purposes. The first is we do trainings around capacity building topics so that you're strengthening areas like board development and fundraising and communications and so forth. We also do training around self-management issues, because we have such a talented group of leaders across the state who are doing so much work, and burnout is a very definite possibility for our leaders. So we try to do at least one session in each convening that really addresses how do you keep sane and take care of yourself so that you can continue to serve your community. And then convenings, in addition to being a learning opportunity, is also a networking opportunity. We invite all Latino nonprofits across North Carolina, not just those who have a grant at the time, because we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to continue to strengthen the network and the collaboration between organizations. And we want to make sure that that's also an opportunity for you to build some relationships that will serve your organization and perhaps you personally as well as time goes along. And I think, except for possibly La Fiesta del Pueblo, it's maybe one of the few times that organizations across the state have a chance to get together in one place. So we obviously invite you to take advantage of convenings as well. And for those who are not grantees, we provide a stipend so that you can get there, pay for mileage and a night's hotel stay. The other reason it's a networking opportunity is that our funders are invited to the convenings, and it is really a win-win situation where funders get a chance to sit in sessions with you and learn what some of the issues are for Latino communities, and to meet the staff and board of Latino organizations. It gives them really a hands-on experience of what's happening with their grant dollars, which they honestly don't often get even in their own grant making. So it's a value add for the HIP Collaborative. And it often is an opportunity for all of you to talk to funders who you may not have a chance to ever meet in person and bend their ear about their work, say more about your work, and develop some partnerships and relationships that can serve you in good stead. So it really is a wonderful opportunity to network with your colleagues and with funders across the state. All right, so any questions just generically about HIP's grant making and the convenings before we move to the actual application process for this grant?
Hi, Althea. It's Pam again.
Hi, Pam.
Do you know where this year's convening is going to be?
In Greensboro is our goal, and the wonderful folks on the line, Rachel and Felicia, we're all working right now to get a place for that, but our intent is to have it in Greensboro the first week in October.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Was there another question? Okay. So let's move on to the application process, which I know is what you're all so interested in. So the first thing is this will definitely be a competitive process. HIP would love nothing more than to be able to fund every organization across the United States and Latin America, but certainly I would love to be able to fund it in North Carolina. The challenge is that now as Latino organizations have grown, we have about 70 organizations that we have sent this RFP to, and we will probably be able to fund 35 organizations, something along those lines. So it'll definitely be a competitive process. This will be a one-year grant. We have about $600,000 available for grant funding, and we won't know exactly how much each grant will be, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $30,000. We're going to review every single application, and then from there we'll make a first cut of those applications that will move on to a site visit, either in person or by phone. So, in prior years, I think when HIP first started in North Carolina, we had some 20-some organizations, and it was easier to support most of them. Unfortunately, we're only going to be able to support some of them this time. So that means that having a strong proposal is definitely a best fit. We'll talk more about the capacity building project choices that David was referring to when we talk about the org assessment in the next slide. But let me say that it really is important for you to understand what your most important needs are for your organization and prioritize those needs and be able to clearly articulate why it is a need. Because we really want to make the most impact we can with the limited dollars that we have. So we want to choose organizations and projects that really are going to hopefully tip the scale for that organization, help them to move forward in a meaningful way. Identifying the leadership for the project is really important. We want to make sure that whoever is at the helm, not just of the organization, but of whatever this capacity building project is exactly the right fit for the project that you're planning on doing. One of the things that sometimes happens is because organizations are looking for funding, particularly for the ED, it is challenging sometimes with grant dollars to fund the ED. They'll make any project that comes along be the ED's responsibility. And while certainly the ED is always looking over everything that goes on in the organization, is that really the person who's going to be most directly involved with this project? So it's important for you to be able to articulate whoever the leader is, that they're really the ones who should be doing it. Clear objectives and activities with a timeline and measurable outcomes. As you'll have seen in the grant application document itself, we want to figure out what your objective is and what are the pieces that are going to lead directly to that. Sometimes we have objectives presented to us that are pretty nebulous, like we want to raise more money for the organization. That doesn't give us enough information to make a decision on, versus an objective that is within the next year we want to have raised our income by 10% through membership and individual donors. Then that's a tangible objective that we can really sink our teeth into. And then you would have a series of activities that are going to strengthen those objectives. We're going to do this kind of outreach in this community. We're going to contact these people. Whatever it is, those activities then will reinforce that objective. So make sure that they're congruent. Sometimes a really good way is to think if you had to explain this to a 10 or 12-year-old and they wouldn't understand how it is that going and talking to someone would lead to more dollars, if you haven't clearly expressed it like a 10-year-old might understand, it may not be a clear linkage. So make sure that they're tied together, your activities and your objectives, and they're clear. This next bullet is one of the most frustrating pieces when I was at a couple of different nonprofits, the question of sustainability. It is so challenging sometimes to think of how could we sustain this after this grant money goes away. And so the most that you can do to think about once we increase this capacity, is it permanently increased, like if we did staff development or board development? Well, then whatever they've learned should be able to be sustained. Or do we need to do a follow-up training the following year, and where will we find the funding for that? So think about how you're going to sustain whatever the capacity was. And then a realistic and appropriate budget. And let me say that this is also an area where organizations can get themselves into trouble. They may say, we're going to do a whole new communications plan, and we're going to hire a consultant to help us with developing a new website and aligning our brand, and then doing an outreach marketing campaign to our community and to businesses. And they outline this really fabulous project. And then when we look at the budget, 95% of the budget is going to the executive director's salary. And we think, wow, how are you going to hire the consultant and do all the publicity and publish the materials and so forth when there's nothing in the budget that says so? So make sure that whatever you say you're going to do on the one side in the narrative is very clearly linked to how your budget is laid out. And we can, if you ever have questions about that specifically, we can go over that as well. So any questions about this page about guidelines for a strong proposal? And in just a minute after we're done with looking at the org assessment, I'm going to ask you all to share some of the things that your organization is needing and then you're thinking might be a good fit for this proposal that you're about to make. Okay, so, and I'm sorry it still says add link, but you all received the organizational assessment yesterday in the email. And that organizational assessment, first of all, is a compilation of an assessment that was used both by the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits and the Western North Carolina Nonprofit Pathways. It was kind of a blending of those two. And it covers most of the areas that you might think of in your organization's structure and systems and processes. So it looks at your mission, it looks at your communications, financial management, fundraising, board structure, staffing issues. And it asks a variety of questions throughout all that to assess, is your mission clear and clearly understood by your community? And you would say yes or no, or it needs work. And so by asking all of these questions, you'll be able to see where are the gaps. Perhaps in the mission section of it, you're all good. Everything there is checked off and it's in good shape. But when you get to the financial management part of it, oh, there are 3 or 4 gaps there in that list of questions for financial management. And so going back to David's question about how to prioritize, when you look at the different sections of the organizational assessment, and if you fill that out, not just by yourself as the ED or program person, but rather invite your staff and some of your board members to do it, or even do it at your upcoming board meeting, then everyone is on the same page with understanding where the organization really is. I've seen this exercise work brilliantly with boards who really don't understand the management of an organization, and when they sit down and they go through this with the ED there, they have an opportunity to ask questions like, oh, what is this question about bylaws? Do we have our bylaws in place? Oh, then it's an opportunity for the ED or the board chair to bring those bylaws out and have that discussion. So really, if you can answer all of those questions with several people in the room, then it'll become fairly glaring. Oh, our 2 areas are A and B that are the 2 biggest areas of weakness, and what within those are the weaker points within those sections, then that will also inform what your capacity building project can be. If you do an analysis of your fundraising and you see 95% of your money comes from grants, well, that's an area of weakness. Maybe we need to think about how do we do individual membership, or how do we go talking to businesses, or create individual donors. So hopefully doing that assessment will be an opportunity for your organization to understand where it is, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and then that will inform your choice of a capacity building project. So I want to take a second here and see, do you have any questions about the use of the organizational assessment?
This is Mary Jo. Is this going to be used as a weight toward our application?
Not at all. You don't have to turn this in at all. To give you a little background, in the last HIP grant cycle in 2010, we actually asked all organizations to do this assessment and to answer the questions. And it wasn't weighted either at that point. It wasn't part of the application. But we used it as information to understand what are the biggest challenges happening overall for our organizations. And then we chose topics for the convenings based on what was most challenging. But this is really for your use only and to help you hopefully develop a stronger application.
Okay, that's great. I just saw on there that it was required prior to submitting your application.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I sent you the one that we used last time, and I forgot to take out that languaging. So no, it's not required. Thank you for clarifying that. Good question. Not required. Not required. Other questions about the org assessment?
This is Pauline again. So you say it's not required, but you're saying that it is weighted, that it
not weighted.
No, it doesn't help you to get the grant.
Correct. Not weighted.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So, no, in fact, don't turn it in. Don't send in the results of it at all. It is just for your use, but we have found it as a very helpful tool. And there are some organizations on the phone right now who were part of the last grant cycle. Perhaps you can speak to how you may have used the org assessment last time.
Yeah, hi, Althea. This is Pam again.
Hi, Pam.
Hispanic Liaison. Yeah, we were one of the organizations that did use the assessment last time, and it was really helpful because what we do is we passed it around to staff members as well as the board so we could get individual feedback and weighted it to see where everybody felt our greatest needs were. And we were going through lots of transitions, and it was really helpful to see many different things, between the differences between what the staff impression was as well as the board's impression of what the organization's strengths and weaknesses were. But also it really helps for the application to fine-tune the priorities you need, because you could see when those X's are vacant or filling the boxes, you know where your most needs are. So it was a really good tool.
Thanks. And let me say, it's not the only organizational assessment tool out there. There are many others. It's just one that we've used.
This is Mary Jo again. We're getting ready to go into a board retreat, and I was wondering, is there a way I would, because I'm new, was not here last year, is there a way to get a copy of what we turned in last year so we could use it as a comparison?
Good question. Will you do me a favor, Mary Jo, and send me an email, and I'll look for it after this webinar?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Because the way we had people do it last time is not to, again, because we weren't using it as weighted and it was not shared with funders, it was anonymously shared, we had you all fill it in, at least on our side, through SurveyMonkey. And so I don't know if I can actually pull apart which organization was which respondent in SurveyMonkey from back then, but I'll see if I can. Other questions about the org assessment? Okay, so I want to take a moment then and just have you all share what sorts of capacity building challenges are you experiencing in your organization that you're considering applying for. And let me give two little caveats of it. One is, of course, there are all ideas are valid. Every organization is wherever it is, and so we share here as colleagues and not as anyone who's trying to get any information additionally from others or put anyone else down for where they are. And also there are part of this application session is for you all to ask questions so we can help each other fine-tune what your needs are and how to meet those with a project. So feel free to ask any question or to share any information that you'd like to about where your organization is and what you're thinking of working on.
Okay, I'll go
Hi,
first.
this is
It's Pam again from El Vincolo. Well, I think one of the areas, and again, the tool needs to be used again, but one of the areas that over the past months has been glaringly obvious to us is that we need to build our individual donor base. We have a very nice base in funding from foundations at the moment, though that changes. But rural Chatham County is always a challenge, finding both foundation funding as well as individuals. But we strongly need to work on that. So that's one area that I'm going to be focusing on.
Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
This is Angeline from El Pueblo. One of the things we're working on right now is to recruit new board members. And once we have new board members in place, I think there's a lot of things in the governance section that I'd like to work on next year, like, you know, reviewing our bylaws and our policies, both like internal policies and external ones. So that's an area I think that we're likely to apply for support in.
And Angeline, do you have a particular process already established at El Pueblo for board orientation and training?
We're in the process of developing that, so depending on where it looks like we're having an orientation session for potential board members later this month. So I think I'll have a better sense from that in terms of the people that we're looking to bringing on and whether or not they have previous board experience and things like that, like what direction we'll have to take that in.
Sometimes it's helpful, and it's for all of you, just so you know, I sit on the Center for Nonprofits board myself, and I've certainly sat on other boards before, and when I joined the Center for Nonprofit, they have a codified process that every board member goes through regardless of their experience, regardless of their knowledge of board management or nonprofits or anything else, and it's always the same process. So everyone gets the same introduction and the same evaluation and the same training on budgets, and here's where our financials are, and here's our mission, and I've just found that to be kind of the gold standard of having some process that every board member goes through so that everyone comes in and starts with the same information. So as you're exploring the folks you have coming in and their orientation and training, it might be good to figure out if you want to make anything more solid about how you do that on a regular basis.
And do they share that process with member organizations?
I'm sure you can call their staff helpline, and they can give you those tools. Yeah, and for all of you, I mean, not just because I'm on the board, but I have just found the Center for Nonprofits resources to be vast and really underutilized by all nonprofits. So avail yourself. If you're not already a member, become a member, and if you are a member, just call them as often as you want for as much help as you want. They really are talented and have a great resource to share.
This is David. I certainly can relate to the board development piece, both on the recruitment side and ensuring that we have some greater numbers of youth and more diversity coming to the board. And I think we're growing stronger in the training processes and have some good resources here locally through the nonprofit consortium that are really doing some good work around board development training. And so we're getting there. I think it's the recruitment process that we need to continue to work on. And you know, one other area that's really popping out to me is we'll be holding our first fundraiser this September. and we're really excited about the idea and what's going to be happening, and looking at that as a really sustainable donor cultivation piece. If we can really pull off a great fundraiser, bringing brand new people or strengthening existing donors, and what we're recognizing is how important communications is, so that when people are first buying that ticket or first wanting to find out more, making that first donation, that they can really go somewhere where the story is laid out very simply, through pictures, through minimal text, through some clever branding. And sometimes I don't always like using the word branding in the midst of nonprofit work, but I think it's still important and smart and can be done with integrity. So I think the ways that communication piece and fundraising piece are linked is really important to us. And I think we're discovering, we have this fundraiser coming up in about 2.5 months, and our communications are not entirely where we'd like them to be yet. So.
And you do raise a great point there. Oftentimes people think about fundraising and they only think about that end result, how do we get more dollars in, but all of the contributing pieces, do you have an effective story? Have you done enough evaluation to have an effective story? Do you have an effective communications vehicle so that you can actually get the story out? Have you done a good marketing analysis to know what how the story should be couched? All those pieces are very important, so I appreciate that you're kind of looking at fundraising from a variety of levels, including communication. And so, you might look at an application that has as one of its goals about a certain fundraising goal, but that the strategies have a lot to do with the communications piece, and maybe some of the goals are also around the communication piece.
Gotcha. And if we find through an organizational assessment that say 1, 2, and 3 are communications and fundraising, which are linked, and then board development, have you had applications where people will have a couple of different pieces within the application, or is it better to really stick with one particular focus?
That is such a good question. I'm glad you asked it. Part one is, with $10,000 to $30,000, you can't reinvent the whole wheel. Right? So we often have applications that are like, oh, we're going to revamp the whole house, we're going to paint and move in new furniture and do everything all with $10,000, and we're going, no, that's not going to happen. So it's important to prioritize. With that amount of money and with 1 year, which is the other limiting factor, you want to focus on 1, at most 2 projects to make sure that you're successful. Our goal, I know sometimes in grant writing it feels like funders may want you to, find the cure for cancer and run a marathon all at the same time. We just want you to do one thing and do it well, that it's really going to have an impact in your organization and put you in a better place a year from now than when you started. So we're not saying you can't have 2, but want to make sure that you're going to be able to manage the intensity of both of those projects in a way that you'll be successful. So how many is really up to you, but my recommendation is certainly no more than 2 projects. Okay. And I want to, David said something that just reminded me. Several organizations are looking at board development and the recruitment process and the diversity of that board, and have found that part of their board development needs are around cultural competency training for their board and staff. And cultural competency not just being, how do Latinos work with Anglos, but rather we want to add young people, or we want to reach out to the African American community, or we want to add older people to our mix, or folks who are not nonprofit types but business leaders. How do we bring all these different cultures and parts of our society together? So that may be also something that might be of interest to your organization. Other questions or sharing about what your organization is focusing on?
This is Bill with the...
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill. I'll go next.
Okay, Bill, you go, and then...
Okay. So, excuse me,
Will you
Bill
introduce
Garcia
yourself, Bill? Good.
Yeah, I'm Bill Garcia, the chair of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce of Charlotte Foundation. Sorry for getting late on the call and missing the introductions. But I've since caught up and happy to share some of the work that we're doing. So the Latin American Chamber serves the Latin American business community in the Charlotte region we've grown tremendously and have started to branch out in terms of offering meaningful programs for our entrepreneurs, small businesses. However, the funding, we're implementing a pilot project, and it's a one-year pilot. I will have to say that the evaluation of the participant outcomes is an area that we can strengthen in order to build a more solid case for future funding of that particular program, but then also to give the organizations, I should say, it's a collaboration, a better sense of that whole evaluation process and the usefulness of capturing those outcomes in order to present that information to funders and apply that same methodology to other programs at its inception rather than, building it into the program as you're executing the program, if that makes sense. So that's one area. And then two, we've done some work with the Duke Law Clinic to look at our organizational structure in alignment with the Chamber and have started some great work there, but I think there's a need for some follow-up in terms of just ensuring that we have proper memorandums of understanding with the Chamber, and that would set the stage for similar arrangements with other chambers, Latin American chambers throughout North Carolina certainly, but as well the Southeast. We've had some interest in our model, and so just ensuring that the foundation can serve those other chambers, but doing so in a way that, where all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted in terms of the legal compliance piece.
You've named two very important areas, the evaluation piece, which is oftentimes people think of evaluation as something we have to do for somebody else to prove that we're doing a good job. And a good learning organization uses evaluation as a way to analyze the work they're already doing and tweak it and make it better. And also, as you said, use it from the very beginning in the development of the project to make sure that as the project develops, it's being effective and using resources efficiently. Right. So evaluation is really wonderful. And also you mentioned the MOUs and relationships with other organizations. Going back to that question about sharing resources or partnering with other organizations, we find that that's a very common thing, especially since some of our organizations have been birthed by other Latino organizations. Like El Centro Hispano started, and then the credit union kind of was born partially from that birthing, and that's happened several places. So creating very clear levels of communication and a division of organizational structure and what the relationship and collaboration is going to be is definitely important to avoid being embroiled in any unclear, messy, tangled webs between organizations. So that's fabulous. Certainly a great piece. And also for the foundation in particular, distinguishing itself, like what is its work separate from the Chamber's work. Right. Related to, but also separate from.
Yeah, well, the foundation is the 501c3 arm of the Chamber, which is a 506 organization, so it can only support charitable or educational activities of the Chamber versus, those activities of a Chamber that might be more driven by the need for co-marketing, co-branding. Companies want to jump in and target a certain audience, and so that's how we are able to attract corporate sponsors. But any of those sponsored activities would not be something that the Chamber, the foundation would collaborate on. Right. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Okay. The part of the reason I was saying is that sometimes, while maybe the internal partners may even understand the distinction, out in the community, that distinction is not so visible or understood. Right. And so, clarifying those roles both internally and externally is very important.
Yeah, and thank you. I think as we get through our pilot and as we're able to articulate some of the differences that we're making with those participants, just providing education on the American business systems, language, that sort of thing, access to capital, as we're able to articulate the difference that that foundation's work is doing, then I hope that we'll get to a point where it'll be more transparent. So transparency, improved governance is all part of what we want to incorporate into our legal work.
Good, good. Thank you. I heard somebody else was chiming in at the same time as Bill.
Yeah. That was me, Alice.
Hi, Alice.
Hi, I'm with the Latino Community Development Center, and I'm glad you went first, Bill, because we have a similar structural issue in that we are the 501c3 arm of the Latino Community Credit Union. Okay. But the Development Center has been traditionally doing financial education for the joint membership. And just this year we started working in affordable housing. And so we have our first properties, and we had a plan to implement that, and we're finding that we have some gaps in the financial management and the legal compliance, potentially. So that's an area we've been working with the Duke Law Clinic, and how do we make sure that we have a clear separation of these two organizations, because really it's just the 501c3 doing the affordable housing, and how do we protect the assets of the credit union and just make sure that we feel comfortable with the distinction between the two organizations and that activity.
Interesting to see how different organizations in different locations are having some similar quandaries. And Allison, your presence helps me remember that the Development Center also has a few different locations.
We work out of the 10 branches of the credit union. So as you mentioned, this idea of cost sharing between organizations, and we do that. We have a very small infrastructure for the 501c3, and that's part of the challenge. I think we'll have to increase that infrastructure with this new activity that we plan to continue into the future. So this is a perfect opportunity for us, because we really are at the stage of needing to build the capacity of the 501c3 somewhat more than it has been in the past. It needs to take on some more ownership of this project.
Yes. And let me say that part of the reason I was asking about the different chapters is because in the last grant round, the Development Center had an application for to do some work in their Fayetteville office, and did a facilities planning piece, which was really a great, different twist on capacity building than we often see, where they did an analysis. And so I just want to bring that up because, one, it's facilities, which is not often what people think of capacity building. And part two is because if there is a separate chapter or part of your organization that you want to focus on, you can do that sometimes with the application if you have multiple sites. And so it may strengthen one side of the organization, not just the whole entire organization.
And we've been so pleased with the results of that, by the way. It was really a worthwhile exercise and caused us to move, and the move has been very successful. So we thank you for that.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, let's take one or two more sharings, and then we'll move on to the rest of this.
This is Pauline. I've been doing counseling for Hispanic small businesses, startups, for a number of years, working with volunteers. We feel like there's been a big change here in Winston of a lot of Asians coming in, a lot of different types of Hispanics, and so we were thinking about maybe doing an international business community needs assessment to figure out, what really are the needs of the people starting businesses now. Not only, Hispanic is a major one, obviously, but of course integrating some of the others also. And we were thinking of using our Hispanic Student Association members, the youth that are attending Forsyth Tech, to go out and do these assessments and come back and perhaps then hire a Hispanic counselor to do some of the some of the counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like something that would fit in at all? I mean, that sounds totally different from anything I'm hearing right now.
And it sounds, Pauline, a little bit more programmatic than capacity building to me, and maybe you and I can discuss it more offline so I can get a deeper understanding of it. But it sounds like in order to strengthen one of the programs that you've been doing around, the business coaching, that you want to do more outreach and so forth and understand what's happening in the community. And that would strengthen that one program of the International Center of Foresight Tech, but it really wouldn't build the capacity of the organization overall.
Okay, but I mean, up in the top of capacity building, there is community needs assessment.
Yes.
Do you want that just in general? Because we were going to do that in general, but then we thought, that's really broad to try to get to the whole community.
Right, right. So yes, community needs assessments can be definitely a piece of it. And so if there is, often a community needs assessment is tied into strategic planning, where the organization may get to a point and say, are we really in touch with and doing what our community says we need to do in any particular area or overall? And so we're going to do a community needs assessment and take those results back and have that inform our strategic planning process so that we decide, what tweaking we may need to do to our mission or to our programming and so forth. So it can be part of an overall plan for the organization, Pauline. So I don't want to make it seem it's totally a no, but that that will it inform the work of the organization overall to have the results of this, and how will you be incorporating the information that you get in a way that's going to inform the organization's work?
Okay.
Okay, so not a no fully by any means, but maybe think more deeply about how those results will come back and be part of Foresight Tech's work moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. And I want to just highlight in the last grant round that Foresight Tech did this really wonderful project of accent reduction as their capacity building project. And can you say a word about that, Pauline?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm using a phone for someone else to listen in, so I keep, we keep going back and forth on that. Yes, that went really well.
Can you say why you needed that project?
Because we interact not only with our Hispanic clients, but we also interact with a lot of different organizations in town. There was a complaint that our staff had too strong of accents, and it was felt that if we could reduce some of the strongness of the accent, obviously we will always have accents, but that would help with our capacity to reach out to more agencies, and it also took away the need for me to do a lot of the phone answering to the agencies. Our staff was able to get more confidence in not handing off the phone, but answering the people themselves, and it really has worked well. We were talking about it yesterday, and one of my staff said she was really anti-doing it to begin with because she felt like, well, why do they have to mess with my accent? And she said, I would do it all over again if I could. It was fantastic. It helped her move ahead so much. One of ours, the secretary at the time, has now taken another job with drug and rehab in the city, and a lot is because their accents have improved so much.
That's awesome.
It was great training.
So I wanted to highlight that one because it was a really interesting application from Pauline and Foresight Tech. And also because capacity building of your staff can look like lots of different things. And it was, as Pauline has just mentioned, impacting the whole organization, where the ED is having to take time to answer an agency call instead of very capable staff being able to do it just because of an accent. And it was limiting some of the services they were able to provide to their own clients when agencies were using kind of the accent as a way of discriminating against the clientele because of the staff issues. So it was a wonderful outside-the-box concept, and I'm so glad it worked well. And also it was an outside-of-the-box concept for some of our funders, and they were thrilled to see how successful it was. So I say that to say capacity building can look like lots of different things, and so we can do very standard things and things also that may not be normally done in the funding world, but that if you can clearly outline, like Pauline did, outline what the impact would be in the organization and what the need is, then it's a project that can be funded. So thanks for that, Pauline. All right, let me say that this is not the end of our opportunity to talk about project ideas you may have, but just in the interest of time, we'll finish up the presentation. Please feel free, you have both my office number and my cell phone number, to call me at any time and we can set up a time to discuss your ideas, and my job is really to provide any assistance needed to strengthen your proposal. So with that being said, we'll move on to the nuts and bolts of this, which is that HIP has a two-part submission process. Some of the things you're going to be sending by email, and some you're going to send by regular mail. The parts that you're going to send by email, you received in the first email announcement of the RFP, you received these forms, the HIP proposal form, the proposal budget form, and the organizational budget form. Those three will need to be completed by email, completed online on your computer, and then sent to me by email. We also sent you a proposal endorsement form, which is basically for you and your board chair to sign off that, yes, you are agreeing to submit this proposal. That endorsement form, since we need original signatures, will be one of the items that you send by mail. And then the other two items that will be emailed are a board or advisory committee list and the organizational chart. On the board list, and you will create those, we don't have a template for those. On the board list, I would appreciate it if you list the ethnicity or nationality of your board, particularly if you're planning on using your board as the way that you qualify for being Latino-led, if the majority of your board is Latino. And the reason for that is I absolutely don't want to assume that all Rodriguez's are Latino and that all Smiths are not Latinos. So if you'll put, either Latino, Caucasian, African American, or put, Mexican, Puerto Rican, whatever it is to denote their ethnic or national background, that would be really helpful. And then the org chart, you'll also develop whatever that looks like in your organization. Any questions about these 5 forms that you're going to be submitting by email? Okay. Then we'll move on to, was there a question? Okay. One more thing about the email submissions. As you can imagine, if you send me a document and it says application to HIP, it'll be impossible for me to look on my computer and know which organization it is just by the file document name. So it's really important for me to be able to keep track of all the documents, for you to label your electronic file using your organization's name or some acronym of your organization, followed by a dash and then the name of the document. So there's the example there, Latinos Working in America. It could be either Latinos Working in America - board list or LWA - board list, something that will be recognizable. If your organization often calls itself El Centro, but your legal name is something else, please don't put El Centro because there are 27 different El Centros in North Carolina, and I want to be able to find your application. So make sure that the way you label your file is something clear that we can find it easily. And if there's other supplementary documentation that you're wanting to submit via email, for instance, if you are wanting to use a consultant for strategic planning and wanted to show us the folks that you interviewed, which is not required, by the way, but if by any reason, for any reason you wanted to do that, please send any of that additional documentation through regular mail instead of email. We'd like to receive just those 5 documents that were listed in the prior slide by email so that we can keep all those together. That's what I send. I bundle those in a PDF and send those to our funders for their review, so I don't want to send in any miscellaneous items to them. So please just send those 5 and label them clearly. All right, and then the hard copy list, you're going to send me 2 copies of the documents that are listed below. That proposal endorsement form where you have original signatures of your ED and board chair, a copy of your current 501c3 status, or if you have a fiscal sponsor, a copy of their current 501c3 status, your most recent audited financial statements, if you have those available. So if you've done an audit, let's see that. If you don't have an audit, then send a Form 990 or an unaudited financial statement. And if you're fiscally sponsored, we're going to need one from them as well, not instead of, but in addition to. So if you have financial statements for your organization, please also send us ones for your fiscal sponsor. And then if you're planning on doing a project in collaboration with another organization, make sure that we have a memorandum of understanding of what the details of that project are going to be and that it's signed by both organizations. We want to make sure that what you're proposing has already been agreed to at some level. And if you have a fiscal sponsor, send us the fiscal sponsor agreement that you have there. Any questions about this hard copy checklist? I hear scratchy noises.
Elsie, I have a quick question. This is Allison.
Hi.
Do you want since you want 2 copies of the that first document,
the proposal endorsement form?
Right. Do you need those to be 2 copies of original signatures?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Yes, and part of the reason, let me just say, it's a logistic here on our side, is that one of those documents goes to HIP's national office in San Francisco for permanent records, and one I keep here in our North Carolina file. So I need to have them both and original signatures. Okay? And for those people who do have a fiscal sponsor, if you do, please let me know. There's a slightly different proposal endorsement form that includes the fiscal sponsor signing off on it. So if you do have a fiscal sponsor, shoot me an email afterwards and I'll make sure you get that particular one. Any other questions about the hard copy checklist? Okay. So then just briefly to tell you, here's the timeline that we're hoping to be able to stick to. August 3rd is your submission deadline. We need to have all the documents emailed by August 3rd at 5 p.m., which is a Friday. And honestly, you know, if you get it in at midnight, I probably won't be checking it, but please get it in on Friday. And then the hard copy documents need to be postmarked by that Friday. Then we will bundle all of your applications and send them to funders to review. Prior to sending them to funders, Rachel and I will be looking at them here in-house to make sure that we got everything from you that we needed, that there's no documentation missing. So if there is something missing, we will be calling you or emailing you and asking you to send that along. Want to make sure that your application packets are complete before we send them to our funders. The funders in September, October, we'll be making the first cut of organizations who will not move on to the interview, and then we'll be setting up the site visits for those organizations that are selected for the second level. And then in November, the funders will be meeting to make those final funding decisions, and we'll be notifying you to let you know if you proceeded or not, or if you received a grant or not. And let me go back and say that when we do the first cut, you will get a letter, an email from us that will say, you know, sorry you didn't make it to the site visit, or congratulations, you will be contacted for a site visit. So you will be notified at the first cut, and you will be notified as well in November if you move to site visits that you're receiving funding or not. And then in January, God willing and Creek don't rise, your grant award period will begin, and you'll receive your grant check. And for those of you who were with me 2 years ago in the grant application process, and there were some delays with getting your check, part of that was my own limited capacity as the only staff person in North Carolina, so I'm so grateful to have Rachel now as a program assistant here, and we're hoping to be on time with all of these deadlines. So any questions about any of what we've covered or about this timeline itself? I'm hearing silence, which means that everyone is clear on the whole application process. Yes? Okay, yes. Good. Yes, okay. So we will be sending to you a link so that you can review this recording as well as the PowerPoint as well, so that you can share that with staff or board who you may need to look at that with. And if you have any questions about your project or would like to discuss that further with me, please feel free to shoot me an email or call me at either phone number, and we'll set up a time to discuss that prior to August 3rd. All right, if there are no further questions, thank you all very much for joining and for contributing to the conversation, and we look forward to reviewing your applications.
Thanks, Althea.
All right, thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Althea.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye. Bye.